Alright, hello there. This is a video lecture for Integrated Math 3. We're going to be talking about rational equations, how to solve them. So enjoy! Let's get started. Alright, so we're going to be talking about, as I said, how to solve rational equations. I'm going to do two different examples here. So, first of all, remember when you're solving an equation, any type of equation really, what you're doing is you're trying to find the values of a specific variable that make that equation true. So it could be that there's one solution, there could be a number of solutions, like 2 or 3 even. There could be an infinite number of solutions. There could even be no actual solutions. Okay, so all those are possible scenarios you can run into when solving an equation. All right, just in general, any specific kind of equation. So a rational equation is one where you have some ratios going on, and you're having on the bottom and or top of the ratios on either side of the equation you could have polynomials. Okay, so we're going to first of all do one where we have only variables on the left side. Okay, so this is going to not be as difficult. Before I get into solving this, I want to show or kind of show you that the way that I solve these is pretty much or kind of show you the reasoning for the main trick I use when I solve these. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this window and go into the whiteboard. So if you have just a general proportion, okay, so a proportion is basically an equation where you have two ratios that are equal. Whatever A, B, C, and D are here, they could be a variable, it could be a number, or it could even be an expression or polynomial. It could be a lot of different things. But whatever they are, the steps that I'm going to do are going to be always valid, okay? So when I'm dealing with the proportion, I usually want to get rid of the fractions as quick as I can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply by my lowest common denominator. Okay, so in this case, again, this is a very simple case. We're just using variables. But my lowest common denominators are b times d, because I have a denominator of b here and a denominator of d here. So I'm going to multiply both sides by b d. Okay. And normally I don't do this, but I'm kind of showing you this because it proves that the shortcut that I use always works. So when I do this, looking at the left side, you'll notice I have a b divided by b. Okay, I wanted to get rid of the fractions, I did. Now I have the d right here left, so I have a times d. Here on the right side, my d's cancel out. So now my fraction is gone. What do I have left? I have b times c. Okay, so notice what I have here is I have a times d. So it's the top of one side of the equation times the bottom of the other, and then it's equal to the exact opposite. So the bottom and the top on the other side. I don't know why, I guess I didn't like that circle. There we go. Alright, so this is what we call cross multiplying. It's a trick that I use a lot. You don't have to do it. It's just a shortcut for really what we're doing is multiplying both sides by the lowest common denominator and then canceling out on each side. Basically, when I say cross multiply, it's just a shortcut for doing this thing right here where you're actually let's stick with the colors. Okay, so you again, I'm kind of out of whack here. Cross multiplying. A times d equals b times c. So that's a trick that I'll be using a lot. I just want to show you that so that way you understand that that is always a valid thing to do no matter what you have in those 4 spots. Okay, so now I'm going to go on and I'm going to use that, and I'm going to solve this equation here. So if you didn't see it, this was the problem that came up on Khan Academy. And so what we're going to do is we're going to solve this. We want to find what values of r make this a true equation. Okay. All right, we talked about simplifying rational expressions, and if you remember that, we talked about the fact that we never want to divide by what number? We never want to divide by 0. Okay, so in this case, we're not going to divide by 0 here because we're always dividing by 2. 2 is not 0. But on the left side, we're dividing by r minus 7. Now, this could be 7 if r is 7, right? So I'm going to just write right here, r cannot be equal to 7. Okay. Sometimes, I'm not sure if it's going to happen today in this lecture or not because I haven't done these problems yet, but sometimes you will end up with what we call an extraneous solution, because you will get a solution, like if we did this problem, and I don't know what we're going to get, but if we did this problem and solved it, and our answer was r equals 7. Well, I know r can't be 7. So that would be what we call an extraneous solution. It's a solution that appears to be an actual solution using the algorithm that you use to solve the problem, but it is in fact an extra solution that isn't really a solution to your original equation. Okay, so keep that in mind. Extraneous solutions can happen, so it's a good habit to kind of look at the very beginning and determine if you're going to have any restrictions on your variables. Like right here, r cannot be 7. Okay, so we're just going to note that, and we're going to continue solving the problem. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do cross multiplication. So when you do cross multiplication, when you have expressions, you're multiplying the whole bottom times the whole top. So when you're doing it with an expression, you need to make sure you treat it just like there's parentheses around it. Okay, so first let's do the top of the left times the bottom of the right first. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to distribute while I'm multiplying. It'll save me a step later. So I have 2 times 4r. That's going to give me 8r, and then I have 2 times, you know what, I changed my mind. I'm just, at least this first time, I just want to write this out. So I have 2 times this. You don't necessarily have to show this step if you want to just distribute, if you understand what I'm saying. But it might confuse some people, so I'm going to slow down a little bit. And then we have our other 2 parts. So the bottom times the top. So in this case, this is, I'm still in green. Let's go back to black. 1 times, and then use your parentheses, r minus 7. Okay? And so now, we want to distribute. So 2 times 4r, that's going to be 8r. 2 times negative 6, that's going to be negative 12. Here, I actually could have just skipped even writing 1 times this, because 1 times anything is itself. So this is just r minus 7. And so now we have a linear equation. We have r's on both sides. So let's move all the r's to the left. So I'm going to do that by getting rid of this. Remember, this is like 1r. So if I want to turn it into 0 r's, what I can do is I can subtract 1r away. If I subtract 1r from this side, I have to also subtract 1r from this side to keep my equation balanced. So those are going to cancel. And I'm going to have 7r minus 12 is equal to, those cancel. So all that's left here is negative 7. Okay, let's go down and give myself a little room. So now we want to get this r by itself. So let's get rid of this minus 12. So we're going to do the opposite. We're going to add 12, which means we have to add 12 to both sides. Negative 12 plus 12 is 0. 7r plus 0, 7r. So that cancels out. Here we have negative 7 plus 12, and it's going to be a positive 5. Alright, so we're just about done here. We just need to divide both sides by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. 1 times r is just r. So r is 5 divided by 7. Okay, and then always make sure you check. Make sure this is not going to be an extraneous solution. Make sure it's not going to create a 0 in the denominator. And this is not going to create a problem for us because it's not equal to 7. So our solution is 5/7. Okay, 5/7. So let's go back to the web browser here and put in our solution. So let's just put it in like this. Okay, we got it correct. Alright, so, oh, excuse me, that is inappropriate. Okay, so let's look at a little harder one now. So this one has x's in different places, so we could end up with a quadratic equation at the end, which is why I wanted to do an example like this. It just says, so you can see a quadratic, because if you haven't done a quadratic in a while, I might kind of mess with you a little bit. So this is x over x minus 1 equals negative 2 over x minus 3. Actually, I might have forgot to put the negative in. So let's go back to the whiteboard. This is the problem we're going to work on. I need to make sure I copied it correctly. Okay, let's hide Chrome. Now let's find the problem. Yeah, I think I forgot the negative. X over x minus 1 equals negative 2 over x minus 3. Okay, well, good thing I noticed that. Let's put it in. Alright, so our strategy at the start is going to be the same. So one thing that could mess you up is this negative right here. So if you're going to do top times bottom, bottom times top, you have to make sure you put this negative on either the bottom or the top. It doesn't really matter where, but you have to put it somewhere. If you put it in two places, then you're putting two negatives where you should have one. Then you're going to mess it up and get it wrong. We have to put it somewhere, so let's put it on top. It'll be a little bit simpler because there's only a number instead of having to take the negative of both of these. Let's just put it up here with the 2. So we're going to do cross multiply. So we're going to do the top on the left side. So let's circle these. So we're going to do x times x minus 3. Top of the left side times the bottom of the right side. And we're going to set it equal to the other two parts. So the bottom of the left side times the top of the right side. And again, I put the negative sign with the 2 there. We need to make sure we keep that. So this is negative 2 times x minus 1. Okay, so far this looks pretty similar to the last problem. We need to then distribute. X squared minus 3x is equal to negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 1. Negative times the negative is going to be a plus 2. Alright, so notice we have an x to the second power here, so this is in fact going to be quadratic. So when you're solving a quadratic, what you're going to want to do first is make one of the sides equal to 0. So let's make the right side equal to 0. So let's do this in 2 steps. So first, we want to have 0 x's. I have negative 2. So to get from negative 2 to 0 x's, I have to add 2 x's, which means I'm going to add 2 x's to both sides. So I'm going to have x squared, negative 3x plus 2x is going to be a negative 1x. And then that's going to give me 0 x's, which is going to mean that it's going to be 0. So all that's left here is 2. So then I just have to subtract 2 from both sides. This is, whoa, sorry about that. This is something that can be a little confusing. A lot of times students might try to subtract this 2 from this x. You can only add or subtract like terms. Remember, we don't write it usually, but there is you can just imagine there's a plus 0 here. That's what we're really adding this negative 2 to, or we're subtracting, I guess. That's what we're subtracting 2 from, is this 0 here that we don't usually write. Okay, but don't try to subtract 2 from x because they're not like terms. So what we're going to have is x squared minus x. 0 minus 2 is going to be negative 2. And then these are going to cancel, so I'm going to have 0 over here. Okay. So now you're left with a quadratic equation. So this one's not going to be too bad because it factors, and I think most of them will factor for you. I will mention though that if it does not factor, you always have this guy right here, quadratic formula, that you can use to solve a quadratic. You should have learned about this last year. Basically, I'll just kind of give a very quick idea of what the quadratic formula is. So if you write it in this form here, a, b, and c are your coefficients. They're the numbers. So right here, our coefficients, a would be 1, b would be a -1 actually, c would be -2. That's how you get those. And so your quadratic formula will give you up to 2 answers, and it's a bit of a complicated looking formula. It's -b plus or minus, my square root looks kind of jacked up. Alright, b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. There's a plus or minus, which means you will have likely 2 answers, okay, unless this is going to end up being a 0, which you'll only have 1. Sometimes you might end up having imaginary answers. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but you might have to use that on some of these problems, okay. In this case, this factors pretty easily. 2 numbers that have a product of -2, a sum or difference of -1. Well, the only 2 numbers you're going to be able to multiply. The -2 is going to be a 2 times a 1. One of them is going to have to be a negative if your product is negative. And the sum is negative, which means that we want the 2 to be negative, so that when we add them or subtract them, however you see it, answer will be negative. So this is going to be an x minus 2 times an x plus 1. -2 times 1 is -2. -2x plus 1x is -1x. Alright, so this factors. And so now, I forgot to do a step at the beginning. I'll have to remember to do that. So now, this is zero product property. It says if you have a product equaling 0, one of your factors has to be 0. So either x minus 2 equals 0 or x plus 1 equals 0. Which means here add 2 to both sides, so either x equals positive 2, or right here if you subtract 1 from both sides, or x equals -1. So those are your 2 answers. However, we need to check and make sure neither of those are extraneous, which I should have done at the beginning, and I realized I did not. So I should have done this at the beginning, okay? But here, looking at our denominators, on the left side, if we used x equals 1, 1 minus 1 would be 0. We do not want to divide by 0, so x cannot be 1. On the right side, if x was 3, that would create a division by 0, so x cannot be 1, x cannot be 3. Okay, so we have to go, therefore, and check 1 or 3. Well, we have a -1, however, I believe our answers of 2 or -1 should both be okay, because neither is going to create a division by 0. So this should be, assuming I did not make any mistakes, this should be our final answer. So let's go back and make sure I did it correctly. Always get a little nervous here, because if I did this wrong, I'm going to have to then go ahead and do a new video. Okay, so choose all that apply. So we said our answers are positive 2 and -1. So there's -1, there's positive 2, and then let's check, and we got it correct. So I hope you learned something today about solving rational equations, and that's the end of the lecture. Have a great day.